So why would you ask somebody else to chair your board meeting? You're the business owner, the founder, the managing director, the chief exec. That's your job, right? You're often appointed as the chairman of the meeting when the board meeting opens. Well, in our experience of chairing over 3,000 board meetings over the last decade or so, then I can say that the dynamic in a board meeting chaired by someone other than the managing director is fundamentally different. The normal chair, the owner, the chief exec, MD, they're able to think about what they want to say, their contribution. They can listen to the responses from others and look at how the meeting's going in a way that you can't always do when you're trying to run the meeting at the same time. So an external person chairing the meeting is a mixture of a facilitator, an arbiter, someone who can maybe give a bit of perspective and challenge, but it's done from a different position. It's not done from the position of authority or having people reporting to that person or of power, purely from a neutral stance of, was that a useful thing to say? Does it move on to the next point? Does that lead to an action that we need to agree to? Those sorts of things are easier to do when actually you're distanced, when you're detached from the realities of having to go away and do that action afterwards. So that's why you might have an external person chairing your board meeting. And how do they work? Well, there's a reasonably standard format for lots of board meetings, but the first rule is to make sure you have one. And it's amazing how many smaller and medium-sized companies rely on the fact that there's a degree of familiarity between the directors and the senior managers in the business anyway, talking every day, meeting at the water cooler in the corridor. Why would they need a board meeting? And yet there's something quite fundamental that happens when you get together in a room and you call it a board meeting. You've prepared for it. There's been an agenda published. You have papers distributed. You have the accounts being prepared for that moment. And everybody else in the business knows you're going to the board meeting. You're going to be presenting a case, a proposal for investment or for expansion or moving into a different market or changing the pricing strategy or just reviewing the accounts and deciding whether we need to change the way we finance the business or what the cost structure is like going forward. So there is a benefit in just having the meeting. When you're in a board meeting, there's three types of things that you're going to need to discuss, and you want to try and parcel these up so that they don't bleed into one another. You need to have some amount of governance and formalities of the meeting. The board meeting needs to be properly convened and everybody needs to be aware of their responsibilities and their conflicts of interests. And there are certain things that the company needs to be doing. It needs to be reviewing its risk register and declaring any actions and decisions that have been taken by the board between the board meetings. Those sorts of things need to be got out of the way at the beginning of the meeting. But that's not to say that they're unimportant or should be rushed. Sometimes the review of the risk register can take up a much larger part of a meeting if key risks have just surfaced or if there's been a change as to the view of how risky some element of the business is. And that can sometimes generate the most powerful actions and changes of strategy that we've seen in businesses. But once you finish the governance and the formalities part of the business, we end up in a review phase. And it's important whenever you're having a regular-ish meeting, let's say monthly, that there's a period of looking backwards. And that will usually be dominated by the reports submitted beforehand, which tend to be backwards looking, especially the accounts. So have a look at the management information, see where you're at. Don't forget to look at the balance sheet. Make sure that you've looked at cash flow and especially look at forecasts. The next 13-week cash flow forecast should be a critical document in your board pack. Supplement that with a report from the sales department, the sales director, on what are their forecasts? Where are they seeing the market going? What are competitors doing? What are the rates of new inquiries coming through, new leads? What's our quote rate? What's our conversion rate? What's our margins holding up like? These sort of things will fundamentally inform you as a board as to whether you're on the right tracks or whether you need to adjust course slightly or fundamentally pivot the business. So there's a whole review phase of the meeting. And then lastly, there needs to be a concerted effort to look forwards. And this is often the bit that's hardest to do in a board meeting, usually because the whole of the rest of the meeting has been backwards looking. And it takes a different mindset. Quite often it's worth having a reasonably good break between parts 2 and part 3 of a board meeting, between that part where you're looking backwards and where you're looking forwards. And on the forwards looking bit, at least start with a review of all of your strategic plans. Not in depth, that can be done separately. Maybe have a quarterly or half-yearly meeting to review your strategic plans in greater detail. But refer to them, remind yourself of them. work out what were the key actions that 3 months ago, 1 month ago, you said were due to be completed in this period. Have they been done? Is there any reason, if they haven't, why they haven't? Have they been resourced well enough? Has the importance of them changed? Have that forward-looking enough view away from the financial forecasts, just so that you've got your head above the parapet. A metaphor I often use is if nobody's looking forwards and everybody's down in the engine room, you'll never know whether your ship is about to hit the iceberg. You can be very efficient going in the wrong direction. So it's important to make sure that your board meeting is a mixture of making sure the engine is running well, you're running efficiently, but also that you're going the right way and you're looking forwards and you've got a destination in mind. So if you think about those 3 elements of a board meeting and think about who is best placed to facilitate that meeting, to make it happen, and then to record properly what's been agreed, which actions have been given and to whom, and by when might they be expected to be completed. That's a discipline in itself. It's a very process-based skill rather than needing a specific knowledge or in-depth expertise of the business sector that you're in. So that's how we would go about doing board meetings.